How's it going, everybody?
Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. I know here in Dallas, we are getting just a brief window of habitable weather, I guess I should say. So I'll take it. Fantastic. I see we might have a few more trickling in. Fantastic here. I think we're good to kick off. Well, everybody, thank you so much for the first of this webinar series delving into how nonprofits can mitigate risk and better manage their security postures, leveraging Microsoft's suite of solutions. My name is Jackson McCord, and I am a client director in Tech for Social Impact's growth segment, which is what we deem as managed. And over the years, I've had the privilege of working with some exceptional peers, both internally at Microsoft and in our partner ecosystem. What I'm really excited about for today's session and for this webinar series in general is it's a convergence of an exceptional partner, Levacloud, who I'll hand the baton over momentarily to do their own introduction, with whom I've had the privilege of working regarding on a number of education accounts, of course, nonprofits, all of whom, what do they have in common? They need to make every dollar count, right? And they need to help teams get the most out of their investment and leverage Microsoft tools to serve as an extension of their teams as much as possible. We also have jointly presenting members of Microsoft's product groups, right? Mohit, I'll hand it over to him soon after Levacloud. But that's particularly exciting because as Microsoft puts nonprofits front and center in many ways in our vision for the future and innovation, I'm excited. The product teams, they're increasingly thinking of developing these products with nonprofits top of mind. So it's an incredibly exciting new chapter. I'm not here to drone on, so I will hand the baton over to Gareth and Tony at the Levacloud team, and then Mohit as well, and we can dive in from there.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name's Gareth Young. I'm the founder and chief architect of a Microsoft partner called Levacloud. Jackson did a real good job of introducing us there, but I guess quick background, I'm the principal technical resource. My background, CISSP, chief architect, Microsoft certified, been working in various global cybersecurity organizations for a number of years. So I live and breathe this stuff every day. Tony, do you want to say hello to the folks since your face is on the screen there?
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Thanks everybody for joining. We're very excited. Laura and I have been working with the Microsoft team to help put this webinar series together. Very excited to be kicking off today. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you get a ton of value out of it. Thank you.
And there's Mohit. Mohit, do you want to say hello too before we jump in?
Yeah, hey everyone, thank you for joining. We understand we have so much to cover on security components. Just to introduce myself, I'm a senior PM in the engineering product group department for the security, and would love to talk to you, understand your concerns. So please be open-minded as to what you want to convey, what are the blockers, what do you want to see, and hopefully we can deliver that in this session.
So for anyone who's wanting extra things added to Entra, Mohit's mobile number will be at the end of the presentation. I'm joking.
Any problems you've ever had with Microsoft, any questions, call Mohit personally. But no, this is exciting because truly think of Mohit as the voice internally of Microsoft's products, right? When we speak to the trajectory and the momentum here, again, this is an incredibly exciting convergence. So with that, we can dive right in. I will kick things off by kind of
Jackson,
framing today's conversations. Yes, sir.
You've got some slides you'd like to put up, and I'll take this off. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I'll do that right now. How does that look there, Gareth?
Perfect.
Fantastic. Before I hand the baton back to Gareth and team, I know many of my customers over the years have wanted to get a sense of who's who, what's what, where's where, and regarding the Microsoft ecosystem, right? It can be difficult to navigate. It can be tricky. So I just want to paint this picture here briefly regarding to contextualize and frame our conversation further. Really, where is Microsoft going as an organization? Where are we now? Microsoft has made significant investment in our overall security stack, and that's before the big AI boom, if you will. The tsunami, the explosion of interest, and it's an incredibly exciting time. I call about a year and a half ago. Starting about 2 years ago, we announced we were going to be quadrupling our annual security investment from $1 billion annually to $4 billion over the next 5 years. So that's incredibly exciting, because if we were already recognized as best of breed in endpoint detection and response, email, identity, which is of course going to be front and center for today's conversation, well, where are we going to be 2, 3, 4 years from now, right? It's one of the reasons I was particularly excited to come from a prestigious AI cybersecurity firm before joining Microsoft, and worked at a smaller MDR provider before that. Microsoft was already making gigantic strides in this regard. Further, we are adding to the number of security professionals informing the development and trajectory of these products, like Mohit, every single year, more than many of our point competitors, frankly, have working for them in any capacity. All right, so the human ingenuity and manpower and financial resources funneling into these solutions is truly remarkable. Like I mentioned, I can provide an updated graph here later, updated, validation, right, regarding where we're going as an organization. It's incredibly exciting here. Like I said, as of a year or so ago, we were already recognized as best of breed. We're already vastly improving in a number of areas. But okay, this is sometimes where my customers ask me, I get the licensing, I get the acronyms. We certainly do love our acronyms here at Microsoft. But what is this? What is this stuff, and why does it matter? Right? I mean, just succinctly at the end of the day, can you help us answer that question? Absolutely. So when we talk about Microsoft's XDR platform, extended detection and response, we're talking about Microsoft's platform approach to managing risk across the kill chain. The kill chain, for those who may not be aware, is a methodology originally developed by Lockheed Martin to demonstrate from what an attacker wants at any given time to accomplish what they need to do in order to accomplish their goals. So this is incredibly exciting, because basically before that, security was all or nothing, essentially, as far as the mindset goes, right? Before that, it was very perimeter based. Do your best to keep the attacker out, the threat actor out. Once they're in, and they have free reign and access to anything and everything within the kingdom, if you will, right? Within each phase of this kill chain, you have ways to mitigate risk and deflect and deter an attacker across each phase. I won't go into each section of the kill chain here and now, but just wanted you to know that along the webinar series that we're going to be covering today, that is very kill chain centric. It's meant to get a sense of, at any time, even in enterprise grade, now available again for nonprofits, how can a nonprofit leverage enterprise grade software to disrupt and mitigate risk of a seasoned threat actor from achieving their steps along the kill chain? A key factor here, and what we're going to dive into today, is the Entra suite. I'm particularly excited about this one, as identity is one of my personal favorite areas. Why does identity matter? I'll just frame this briefly and bring it down to earth. The gist of it is, like I said before, an attacker, before the zero trust framework, if you will, if an attacker was in, they were in. They had free reign to everything. We now know that instilling tools such as principle of least privilege available in the which the Entra ID suite really helps empower. We now know that even if an attacker gains a foothold within your environment, you can manage risk by simply maintaining a zero trust architecture in which, well, only the people who have only people who have access to what they should have access and nothing else. That can be incredibly powerful, right? This is incredibly exciting stuff within the Entra ID suite, and that's why we wanted to kick off this section, this series with identity, because it is arguably the cornerstone of a zero trust framework across the board here. I know I'm touching on a lot of different things here. With that, I will hand it over to Gareth to take it from here. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jackson. Appreciate it. Let me bring back my screen share here. All righty. So yeah, jumping in. So just to kind of double down on some of the stuff that Jackson was talking about there, like let's really try and quantify the escalation we're seeing with identity-based attacks, because really it's getting pretty wild out here. I mean, it's definitely one of the key attack vectors that we're seeing as an entry point across all of our nonprofit customers. And if you look at the stats, you know, we're in a place now where attempts on identity have soared to 30 billion monthly, which is absolutely insane compared to, you know, where we were a couple of years ago. You know, imagine 4,000 attempts per second to compromise your Microsoft Cloud identities. You know, it's absolutely relentless, and it underscores that we really need to put some stringent security in place to defend against it. Now, despite multi-factor authentication being there to bolster our defenses, these adversaries are finding other ways to get around it. So for example, for those of you that might use SMS-based multi-factor authentication, we now have one-time password bots that are actually working to trick users into handing over the authentication codes. And, you know, they're doing that through either robocalls or phishing scams. And then, you know, on top of that as well, there's this concept of MFA fatigue that's emerged, where essentially the attackers are kind of playing the long game by constantly having the user prompted with an MFA prompt until they eventually give in and click on it, or muscle memory, honestly, just makes them click on it, so they're so used to doing it on their phone during the day. And recent trends are showing a sharp increase in attacks that are aimed at not just MFA, but passwordless based sign-ins as well. You know, we're looking at sort of 6,000 daily instances of these types of attacks. So it's crazy. And, you know, this is more than just numbers. This is really a call to action for all of us to tighten our security measures and educate our teams on the subtleties of these threats. Now, Microsoft mentioned this concept of zero trust, and I want to sort of take a step back and look at the bigger picture around that for a moment and help you understand where Microsoft Entra fits in and how Microsoft and Levacloud basically help enable zero trust. So, you know, Jackson did a good job of describing how in the old world of doing things, and, you know, some organizations are still aligned with it, we were following this perimeter security model where we essentially wrapped a firewall around everything, and everything inside of that was considered to be secure. But, you know, work has evolved. We're using different cloud apps, collaborating in different ways. Data has moved to different devices in different places. You can't firewall the internet to try and protect it. Believe me, I have customers who have tried and it's not gone well. That's where zero trust was born, because it was recognized that a new framework for security was required. Now, essentially what we're looking at here is Microsoft's zero trust security model. The architecture is made up of 6 pillars, with identity and endpoints being on the left-hand side. They are the foundational components to this, as we're going to discuss and explore as we go through this together here. And, you know, conditional access being right at the center, something that we're going to talk a lot more about as well. So looking under the covers of this zero trust architecture, you can see some products that Jackson had shared on the previous slide and how they map to the different pillars of zero trust. This is a security platform that we've got now, and a framework that's modular. You know, you might be in a position where you want to go on this journey, but there's a couple of tools that you need to keep around for a while before you can completely transition. I mean, any of these Microsoft tools will work with other capabilities, but to get the full protection, the full benefit, and the automation from it, you really need to go all in on the security platform to benefit from all the different integrations. Now, you might be looking at all this information we've presented, even up until now, and saying, geez, man, where do I even start? So that's a great question. First off, going back to the foundation, you need to secure that to reduce risks. I've seen organizations who have spun up a bunch of security tools and are left wondering why they're constantly combating compromised users and malware on devices as well, honestly, in the foundational level. And generally that's because they've not done everything that needs to be done to fully configure and secure these two pillars. It's like building a wall. If you don't get the foundations of the wall correct, it's going to sink, it's going to crack, and it's going to fall over eventually. In parallel to that, you need to get visibility into all of these different areas. And for some nonprofit customers, they might be thin on the ground from a team perspective. In that case, it makes sense to outsource some of that capability. You can't be expected to have your team members watching this stuff 24/7, 365, while they're wearing all these different hats. Now, in this area, Microsoft Sentinel is the tool that's the eye in the sky across all of these different pillars, and can also look at non-Microsoft sources as well to look for anomalous behaviors. Once you've got these two things in place, zero trust is a journey. You need to develop a roadmap to roll out the additional capabilities once you've got the first ones in place. And that's something that we tend to work with our customers on with our expert support services to go with you on that journey. Now, with that understood, let's dive more into Microsoft Entra. So as Jackson alluded to, identity really is the control plane for everything now, instead of it being that network perimeter. And really, the deal here is we need to make sure that only the right people have the right access to the right resources, and you want to keep the bad players out. That's our goal. And what Microsoft Entra ID actually is a universal identity platform that helps you manage and secure all of your users and access all your apps as well. Now, let's ask a couple of questions of ourselves here. Can we honestly say that our end user authentication is seamless and secure today with the way that you're doing it? And how much control do you feel like you have over user access? What are you guys doing to secure identities against current and emerging threats? So Microsoft's approach to identity and access management is really threefold. We're looking to use these tools to secure authentication in a way that's convenient for end users, because if we do make access convenient through these modern user experiences, then they're more likely to use it appropriately. We want to use conditional access to reach a zero trust security framework. And then the third piece is identity protection. We want to safeguard our user identities when they're used as part of a operating system session or application session. Now let's understand a little bit about a product called Microsoft Entra ID Protection, identity protection, that comes as part of the E5 and the P2 licensing. Now, we've mentioned conditional access a couple of times, and we're going to talk a bit more about it here in a minute. But essentially, it protects resources from suspicious requests. Identity protection goes further than that. It provides ongoing risk detection and remediation of suspicious user accounts. This thing keeps you informed 24/7 of any suspicious user and sign-in behavior in the environment. And the bit that I find some nonprofits miss out on is the automated response capabilities, because this can actually proactively prevent compromised identities from being abused. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I know personally, working with a number of nonprofits, like I said, their teams are wearing multiple hats. They're doing a lot to keep the lights on and maximize their investment in their Microsoft capabilities. Any automations that we can introduce into their workflows to free them up and focus on higher value tasks and all the other things going on in the world is an absolute boon for them. Why would we want to have our end users wait to be unblocked when their account's been compromised, when potentially they can actually self-remediate. Now, diving into the mechanics of identity protection, let's talk a little bit about sign-in risk and user risk. So the long and short of it, sign-in risk is where the system's identified a problem with the sign-in. Now that could be, something to do with the location it's coming from, either a location that's atypical from where the user generally signs in, or maybe it's overseas or something like that. And some of you may have experienced some false positives with this, but the good news is this tool can actually be tuned to stop false positives through features like adding your trusted IP addresses to the system so it knows about them. Also, there's user risk, where it's looking at the user account itself, based on, has the password for it turned up on a list on the dark web, or something about the behavior of the account. And generally, in my experience, if someone's coming up as a high root user risk, then they are likely compromised. So how does it actually work? So let's imagine, a user enters their credentials into a logon form. Entra ID protection will look at the user and trying to determine if there's any risk. So it takes a first pass to see if the user's sign-in's valid, and then it performs some additional analysis to determine the risk level of the user. The results of the analysis will basically determine if it's risky or not, and then those signals can be fed into conditional access, where you can actually use those signals as part of a conditional access policy, whether it's to block access or do some other controls. And Entra ID will actually continuously learn the behavior of the user so that it can determine if that account ever then moves on to move into a risky state. Now, we have several best practice conditional access policies that we implement for our nonprofit customers. Taking the sign-in risk signal from before, instead of just outright doing a block if we see a risky user and then requiring one of your team to manually triage it, you can actually have the system prompt for MFA instead. And this would help kind of mitigate any stolen MFA token type attacks, something that we're seeing a lot. And to kind of double down on that, so user risk, this is kind of in the same theme, but as I mentioned, it focuses on a situation where the user's password's been compromised. And part of that can be an escalation of the token theft that I described previously. So we actually ran into a situation just last week with one of our nonprofit customers where they had a user that was compromised. They came in as high risk, and that team received the alert, didn't have any of this automation set up. They had to quickly spin round, disable the account and reset the password. And in the short period of time that it actually took them to do that, that threat actor had actually gained some persistence, had gone into the My Sign-ins page for the account they'd compromised and had added an additional MFA method so that they didn't have to rely on the stolen token. Luckily, nothing happened beyond that because the team was really diligent and did jump on it and block them, reset the password, all that kind of stuff. But had this functionality been just enabled and turned on, that it just wouldn't have happened in the first place. So very powerful capability, extremely important first line of defense. Now, it does go without saying that if your users don't have MFA enabled, then they wouldn't be able to self-remediate in that situation where you're trying to use the protection to prompt for an additional MFA token. In that situation, you would have to kind of use the blocking capability. And I guess on the other side of the coin with self-remediation as well, thinking about the high-risk user scenario, typically we would also force a password reset in that case. So, if they did get in and then escalate to be immediately a high user risk, the conditional access policy would force them into the password reset system, and then they'd go through other authentication to be able to self-remediate. So again, moving away from just outright blocking them and requiring them to wait on one of your team to catch up and help them and all that kind of stuff. MFA in itself is really the lowest hanging fruit you've got to protect your organizations. And I do know that some nonprofits are challenged in this area. We have got some customers we work with where we're working to get there, but we're having to put, some mitigating controls in place while they deal with some internal challenges. Now, identity protection actually gives you some options to make it easier to roll out MFA. You can basically introduce a 14-day grace period to set it up. So when you kind of scope it, the users sign in and they're given 14 days to enroll in MFA. Highly recommend using that if it's a challenge you're faced with on your journey to enabling it. Now, let's talk a little bit about conditional access next. So conditional access is at the heart of Microsoft Zero Trust. It is the gatekeeper to everything. So essentially, it uses different signals that are generated based on user, device, application to restrict access to resources in your environment down to like the app or file level, honestly. So it's not just allow or block. There's a lot of kind of granularity in between. And you do get different flavors of it when you go E3 versus E5. At the E3 level, you get basic capabilities to allow or block. You can also put restrictions based on device compliance status, i.e., is the device they're signing in from managed by us? Is it healthy? Is it up to date on patches, disk encrypted, all that kind of stuff. When you move up to the E5 level or the P2 level, it adds a lot more capability. So first off, the risk-based policies that we just talked about. And in addition to the user risk and the sign-in risk, they've now added a thing called insider risk. So inside of the compliance side of Microsoft 365, there's a thing called insider risk management, which is basically designed to monitor, evaluate user behaviors inside the environment as it pertains to data security. So, is someone downloading an unusually high amount of data from SharePoint and trying to exfiltrate it, for example? The risk level from that can also be fed into your conditional access policies now to make decisions about access. Then token protection. This is actually a preview feature you can turn on. And basically it works at the moment with some different Microsoft 365 services to detect and defend against stolen MFA tokens. We then have session policies. Now, basically all of the nonprofits we work with, we implement session policies to control how long does a token actually last before it expires. We've been in situations where we've seen on multiple occasions token-based threats that could have been averted with session policies. So quick story, we had one customer where the CFO's account got compromised. The threat actor was hiding out in their mailbox for about a month. They did it by, token theft attack. We discovered them because we had actually just started working with the customer at the time, and we spun up all the Defender XDR tools as part of a workshop. And essentially, the threat actor made their move around that same time, lucky for the customer, and it threw off a number of alerts about the threat actor trying to create malicious email forwarding rules within the CFO's mailbox. And basically what they were trying to do was send out invoices to people in the organization, pretending to be the CFO and asking for them to be paid. And then all the mail, when it got replied to, would have gone to this folder that was sort of hidden away from view from the CFO. So as soon as that was discovered, the customer was able to quickly react to it. And going on from there, they put in our best practice policies. So things like the default session token length is like 90 days, which is quite a long time. So we tend to reduce the length for normal users. We'll make it even more restrictive for bring your own device type users. And then for admins, like we cut it down so the token only lasts like 9 hours. So on a daily basis, your global admins and those types of users would be having to renew it just so we can really reduce the attack surface there. And then beyond that, with conditional access as well, you can do integration to a thing called Defender for Cloud Apps, which is basically, think of it as like threat protection for your cloud applications at the service level. So I have a nonprofit customer who is heavily moving their on-premise CRM capabilities into Dynamics 365. And one of the things we're doing for them is building out policies that will potentially gate things like, you know, if you're on a fully managed corporate device, we're okay with you accessing all the sensitive information in Dynamics. But if you're on a personally owned device, you know, maybe we're okay with you viewing it, but you're not allowed to download anything. And that's something that's completely agentless, and it's all driven through conditional access and its integration with Defender for Cloud Apps. So super powerful tool, you know, really at the center of everything Zero Trust. Now, we've talked a little bit about multi-factor authentication. Conditional access introduces a new concept called authentication strengths. So let's say you've got certain apps that you want to have more than just like a, you know, an SMS-based authentication. If you're using it, I would stay away from that if you can, though, because SIM cards can be cloned. You know, maybe you've got some folks that are using the Authenticator app or something else, but you want to have passwordless authentication or FIDO security keys on certain really high-risk apps. So that's where authentication strengths comes in. You can tie them to conditional access policies to say, hey, if these users are trying to access this app, then actually enforce this level of MFA with them over and above the normal. And we actually have one customer who was unable to use the Authenticator app for one of their use cases. So they purchased some like really low cost hard tokens as an alternative for those users. And you know, we're able to issue those and combine them with a strength level for them to get used. So quite good for scenarios where, you know, maybe you can't take a phone into a given place, or, you know, you've got some folks who just for whatever reason can't have phones due to maybe cost reasons. There's alternatives that can be used to secure those use cases that are affordable there as well. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about identity governance next. So access is really easy to grant, but you know, it's much harder to keep track of. And you really need to keep track of who's been given access to what resources so that you can revoke access in a timely manner when it's no longer needed. And you know, these controls should apply to both internal and external users. Entra identity governance allows you to protect, monitor, and audit access to different critical apps and assets. And it's really useful when, for example, you want to ensure that only authorized users have access to something based on policies, or you want to provide your employees and maybe guest users with workflows to request access. You know, maybe you want to establish regular access reviews to validate if access is actually still needed, or you want to establish controls that have got a time limit on them for privileged role assignments. Now, actually got multiple nonprofits that have leaned in on this. And essentially what they're doing is they're using this privileged identity management as a way to reduce their attack surface for highly privileged accounts. So I'm thinking, you know, security administrator and things above that, essentially. And, you know, the way they're using it, you can check the rollout just for the amount of time you need to go in and do the work. There's a complete audit trail behind it. And you even have the option to have an approval workflow. So, you know, imagine a scenario where someone's requesting a highly privileged role, and, you know, you look at the request and you're like, wait a minute, this reads kind of strange. Or you kind of realize that that person's actually on vacation that day. And you're like, hang on, this can't be right. You know, you've got the ability to allow or decline and then take action if the account has actually been compromised. So think of this as a way to not only have an audit trail for permissions, but a way to reduce your attack surface so that if one of your admin accounts, if you will, is compromised, the threat actor doesn't just have instant ability to gain a foothold and start moving through the environment with those permissions. So really, really powerful capability that a couple of my larger nonprofits are leaning in and using and taking advantage of. Now, we talked about this being, you know, a complete identity platform, and lifecycle is a big part of that, right? The join, move, leave process for managing identities is very important, especially for the productivity of any new hires or volunteers or employees that you bring on board. so that you can get them up and running quickly, but have a good amount of security around it. So with Entra, you can automate the life cycle based on HR events. Actually, you can connect it to platforms like Workday and SAP to automatically provision and deprovision access, right? That way we can get the new employees or the volunteers going really quickly, and then if and when they leave the organization, you can remove all those permissions as well. And we've got some customers who have successfully adopted this. They've put a lot of work into automating these processes. But the flip of the coin is we also have worked with some new customers who are really challenged by what I would call the permission storm and excessive groups that need cleanup. And basically there's attestation tools in here that are awesome for solving that problem, or at least getting on top of it. And we've helped build some custom scripts to evaluate guest accounts and group memberships in the past as well, because all this information is accessible at the command line level, as well as through the features in the interface. Now, we've also had customers who have had to juggle multiple identity providers, and the overhead for managing that's a headache. Especially when you move into the device management side of things, we've seen cases where there's just incompatibilities between authentication protocols and that kind of thing. So really, to get the most value out of this, you want to make Entra ID the center of the universe to truly start on your zero trust journey. And Entra ID comes with every level of Office 365. So very, very tangible goal to achieve. And just imagine being able to quickly provision access changes for pre-hires, emergency hires, volunteers with pre-built workflows. And you can even generate temporary access passes to let someone sign in for the first time and set up a passwordless multi-factor authentication out of the gate, starting to get this new generation of MFA that's more secure and less prone to fatigue attacks. And by integrating Entra with platforms like ServiceNow, for example, your users can request and track their resources through a self-service portal, which again just makes things easier for your team if you're already invested in those other ecosystems as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about verified identity next, or verified ID. This is an interesting one, and it's maybe a newer concept for most folks, because this is a pretty new feature. So if you think about it, this concept of your digital identity, at home and at work and across every app you probably use and every service, you're sharing information about yourself. And essentially you're going out to purchase tickets for an event, checking into a hotel, sometimes even ordering lunch. You're having to give away a lot of information about yourself to different providers to enable those experiences and events and things that you're trying to do. And it sort of puts you in a situation where you're effectively, your identity and your digital interactions are owned and controlled by other parties. And sometimes you don't even realize that. How many times have you had a letter come through to say that you've been a part of a data breach or something like that? I just got one the other week, actually. And it's hard to keep track of who's got access to what information. Really, right? So it's a nightmare for users. Now, we think about that on the enterprise side. Collaboration with different consumers, partners requires high touch orchestration to securely exchange data. Think about the overhead of account provisioning between different tools, syncing of personally identifiable information, enabling single sign-on, all this stuff. It's super crucial for us to maintain the privacy and the security for everyone that's involved in that. So recognizing that challenge, the idea with verified identity is to enable what we would call a standards-based decentralized identity system. So the idea is that we're giving users and organizations greater control over their data, and we're sort of providing a higher level of trust and security for apps, devices, and service providers. Now, most organizations handle identity verification today, but a lot of them are looking to do something better. Some of the challenges when we think about this stuff is, how do we onboard employees, contractors, volunteers, customers efficiently? How do we manage secure access to high value apps and resources as you move them online? And then, think about dealing with the frequent account recovery requests that come through and burden IT teams. So here's the thing, what if there was a more efficient and secure way to handle these different tasks? And what can we do to simplify onboarding and access management while improving security? And for me, I think there's a really big use case in here that's yet to be tapped into, or maybe some are already, for the volunteer side of things and nonprofits as well. Those kind of high turnover areas. Now, this verified ID gives you a lot more control and flexibility. So let's kind of understand a bit more about how it actually works. So here's where the rubber meets the road with verifiable credentials. So first of all, we've got the issuer. And this is the organization, your nonprofit essentially, that attests to certain claims, such as the qualifications of either the individual or your status as a nonprofit, the employment status of the actual individual, and their identity. And basically the way it works is they're issued a digitally signed credential, which they keep as proof for the different claims that they make. And these credentials are cryptographically secured and stored inside the end user's digital wallet. Now, looking at the user themselves, this is the individual that's actually receiving these credentials, and they manage it through this concept of a digital wallet, which can be the Microsoft Authenticator app. And then they've got full control over how this stuff is shared. So, when a verifier requests proof of identity or some sort of other claim, the user can approve the request and present the credentials straight from their wallet. Now, on the verifier side of things, this is an organization or service that requests proof of specific claims. So, identity verification for an application, proof of a certification, or like nonprofit status, maybe for legal purposes. Like, does this person work for this nonprofit? Yes. Okay, so we know they're allowed this nonprofit discount. The idea is that the verifier would confirm the validity of the credential by checking that it's been signed by a trusted issuer and that it meets the required criteria. And the idea is it's quite seamless. They don't need to contact the issuer directly. The cryptographic proof assures that the verifier that the credential's legitimate. So the net is that these verifiable credentials put controls in the hands of the user, while at the same time enabling secure and seamless verification. And it reduces the reliance on central databases, which enhances privacy, because we're giving users more control over their data. All of these other third parties don't need to hold on to it at all, because they're able to use this verifiable credential to identify them instead. Now, the way you can kind of get this set up and going, there's some pre-built templates that you can use, or you can actually build out credentials and issue them to end users through the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Basically, the process includes setting things up. Like you can see on the screenshot here, you've got the different fields that you can kind of start to fill out, and then a nice little screenshot of what it would look like inside of the wallet on the right-hand side there. And in that vein, the easiest way to get started is with the Microsoft Authenticator app, so that the credential can be stored within there. Microsoft is not doing this as like a kind of proprietary thing. It's built on open standards that other, vendors and organizations are building off of as well, so that they're interoperable. So if you issue the credential with Entra, they can go and use it with someone else altogether that might not even be, Microsoft related sort of thing. All sorts of different services and scenarios this could be used with. It kind of uses like the blockchain technology that's behind cryptocurrency. It's that sort of idea, essentially, decentralized that way. Now, let's have a look at the end user experience here. So essentially, the user would install and set up the Authenticator app. Yeah, the app's there for you to issue the credential to, and then the user has full control over, what they store and where they present it to, because they could have a few different IDs issued from different places. In terms of presenting the credentials, the user can scan like a QR code that's provided by the other party, and then that enables them to actually share their credential with that other party. And the idea is, as they're going through that process, they've got full visibility to where the credentials are being used from inside of the app, and then they can track the credential activity and see details of every time it's been shared or verified. So very convenient, a lot more seamless than trying to fill out tons of forms and providing personally identifiable information and all that kind of thing, and W-2s and who knows what else to prove where you're employed, sort of thing. And users can share them, delete them, verify them just with a few taps within the app. So it's super efficient for everyday use for some of those different use cases that we talked about. So essentially, this decentralized identity, it shifts the control of personal data to users. The idea is we can own and manage our identity across multiple platforms. So quite a pivot from the way a lot of this ecosystem works today. And from an organizational perspective, you're reducing risk by using it because you no longer really need to handle as much personal data, if any at all. So that takes away a lot of compliance concerns. And I could see that being really valuable in some of these different volunteer use cases where, maybe they've been issued a credential somewhere and you can validate them when they come to volunteer with you. And it's come from another organization, much easier. And, it would make audits easier as well, because you're no longer having to hold all that information on folks that you're dealing with, and I guess vice versa if they're trying to validate with another organization that they work with you. From a developer perspective, serverless apps are kind of the way everything's going, cloud native. And if we're moving to a world where personal data stays with the user, then it makes the requirements to build those apps from a, data compliance perspective a bit more relaxed, because you're not having to store as much. So those development cycles can instead be focused on the user experience and building innovative apps. So yeah, the net of this is easier, faster, and safer. So yeah, very excited to see how organizations really start to build out these new capabilities using these open standards. So moving into the next segment of this, I'm going to hand things over to Mohit to run through a demo of some Entra ID capabilities. Mohit, would you like me to click the buttons, or do you want to try and take over the share there?
You can click the buttons. I want to be respectful of the time as well. So my idea for the demo is making sure we have the use cases that we discussed and posted by the folks here. So I'm going to have a quick click through demo and then share my screen and actually share my tenant as well. So next. So starting with identity protection, we want to talk about the high risky sign-ins and the users. So as you might be aware of conditional access, you can create a policies. Next. There itself, there are multiple options or conditions that you can create. One of them being the conditions. Next. We can click on conditions, and there itself, you'll see user risk and sign-in risk. I won't go deeper into what all it can be achieved. Next. But the idea is for any sign-in risk and user risk, you can, based on where they're located, what kind of position they have, on different conditions internally, you can set them as high, medium, and low. And for any high risk user, let's say in this case, you can have certain grants for them to fulfill even before they can proceed. Now, not only next, we have conditions. We can even have them reset their passwords or even block them. So knowing that where the user is coming from, let's say you are a United States company and want to make sure that none of the sign-ins are going from South Africa. Anyone who's signing in from South Africa should be blocked. That is possible. Anyone who's signing from India needs to reset their password, or from certain countries, that is possible. Next. So in this policy, I'm assigning require MFA. Now, we talked about MFA itself. There are multiple options today for MFA. So there were questions about external users, internal users. So we can allow to have them authenticator app, as well as I'll show you in the demo as well. There are other options like email OTP for external users who don't have authenticator app or cannot use their phones. Next. Furthermore, now these policies can be enabled right away, versus we have something called report only, which allows the conditional access policy to be enabled, but it's on the report only mode. So you know where the user is going through. Next. So as a user, when they try to sign in, they have to approve their sign in. So in this case, the user is registered with Authenticator app. They will see a prompt next that they need to approve. Once approved, they'll be able to access their resources. Perfect. Now I'm going to share my screen, Garrett. So just give me 1 second. Hopefully you can see my screen. Anyone to confirm?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. I can see.
Awesome. So starting with identity protection again, taking a few minutes here, and then we'll dive into identity governance. So apart from looking at the noise that someone mentioned in the chat, there are a lot of things that you even can see from the dashboard. What is being blocked, what is not remediated, where the users are coming from, what are the activities, and what are the recommendations. So for any user, whether internal or external, using corporate devices or personal devices, where we can push the MAM policies with personal VPNs or corporate VPNs, there is a machine learning behind the scenes that needs to understand what it needs to block versus what it needs to allow through. So the false positive needs some intervention from the admins for about 15 days to a month to visualize what needs to be allowed versus reduce the false positive noise. Furthermore, like I look at this, I can further go down and look at what were the risk detection, who was the user, and look at multiple things for me to identify whether I should go ahead, block, should that be extended to multiple users, and how to scale, making sure that that activity doesn't happen again. So I have user risk policies, sign-ins, and furthermore, I can dive deeper in and look at one of the users and look at the basic policies, the recent sign-ins, and detections not linked to sign-in. So again, we're talking about sign-in risk and user risk. All that is in place. For the remediation, I can have MFA on top of it. I can ask the request to change their passwords. So in this case, no risk was found. But if I let it summarize by Copilot, because I have Copilot in my environment, it would allow me to what action needs to be taken if the user is a high risk. So I can just say, hey, it needs to reset their password. They push it, they change their password, and then a remediation action is already taken. Hopefully that answers most of your questions. Then looking at the governance side. So identity protection is one place where we're looking at when the user sign in or what the user's authentication flow looks like, but at the same time, what kind of rights are being given to the user and how we can make sure there are minimized risk if at all a user is compromised. So there can be different life cycles for external users and internal users, but we'll focus on how, like now let's assume from an HR system, the user is already created, is part of your Active Directory or Entra ID, and that could be a B2B user or an internal user. Thereafter, we want to make sure as they're part of your tenant, they can access certain resources. So assume I'm one of the admins who's leading one of the projects. I want to create an access package. As I click on access package and want to create a new access package, I want to make sure that I have certain rights and certain permissions. So there itself, I need to go to privilege identity management, which is another feature. So privilege identity management is for any kind of admin roles, we want to make sure they have just-in-time access, on which in turn means they only have access to what they need and for a certain period of time. So if I look at my roles, I have certain eligible roles and certain active roles. So what I can do is I can go to eligible assignments and click on identity governance and activate it. If I don't do that, even though I'm be able to go to access packages, click on new access package, it won't allow me to go any further. So it says user does not have access to create access packages. Going back, I activate my role and I need to give certain time. So now this duration can be customized to whatever you want, but 8 hours is usually a person that is working. So let's say I want it for 1 hour just for the demo reason. I request for it, activate it. While it's activating, another thing for just-in-time access, it can be provided through a group. So let's say you have a group of 5 users who are gonna be working as global admins or should be working as global admins. Instead of getting access to the role itself, they are accessing requests to a group, which can then be monitored. And once they're part of the group, they automatically get access. So that is called PIM for groups. I'm not going to go deep into it, but that's how it works. In the entitlement management under access packages, not to go over the whole access package itself, but just to talk about, like, there are different resources you can group into an access package, which could be teams, groups, applications, SharePoints. Not only that, if you have an application that is already integrated, which today with Entra ID, that could be up to 4,000 applications, you can further down have the roles that are allowed in Salesforce can be migrated to Entra ID, and that can be selected as well. And then we talked about the type of user. So it could be internal user, external user, or a direct assignment. And furthermore, you can have approvers. So taking a use case, if there's a organization who wants to get it approved before the resources are assigned, whether internal or external, that is possible. And you can have like a life cycle of that access package as well. We are at time, but Jackson, do you think we can go ahead for a few minutes?
I believe so. Yeah.
All right. Really quick on the access packages with access reviews. So now let's assume as a user, I got access to some of the resources. What if I am a B2B user? I'm not using it at all. That's where the recertification comes in. We want to make sure on the zero trust journey, a person who needs access keeps the access, otherwise their access is removed. That is possible. So that is called access reviews. We can have access reviews for certain periods, can be reviewed by self. So let's say I'm being an admin, needs access to certain resources, needs to be reviewed every quarter. That's something that we follow within Microsoft as well. Something that needs to be approved by manager or specific reviewers, all that is possible. I went really quick, but once this is created, my access to any of the access packages, I can request it just by providing like what resources I'm requesting. I can continue provide what specific period I want to and have a justification. That's it. That's how easy it is. I know Garrett mentioned about verified ID. You can configure your verified ID with your access packages. So making sure the user who's coming in needs to have certain attributes filled in. They need to submit a form or whatsoever. If they are a contractor, they need to have some kind of certification. All that is possible. I'm going to stop at that. I hope I was able to answer most of the questions and let Jackson or Garrett take the lead now.
Yeah.
Let me know if I left any questions. Sorry.
You do have we have until 20 past as well. So if there's just a couple more things, if of course you did a fantastic job, you have more time. So if you wanted to dive in on anything you think you may have had to breeze over, feel free.
Awesome. Yes, I did.
There we go. Love the enthusiasm. Let's go. Cool stuff.
Yeah. So there were a lot of things that I didn't cover. Sorry, I thought it's just 1 hour. But apart from applications, I can look at groups. So if I, let's say, have a group, I add it in. I can have an owner as well as a member assignment as well. Now, these can be dynamic groups or static groups. All that is applicable. So visualize a B2B user who's coming in, needs to be part of a group, to be part of a project, needs to be part of some SharePoint sites with a different role. That all that roles will come in as well. So I have customized roles, all that will show up here. Furthermore, we talked about multiple stages. So now, as an admin, I want to make sure that one of the representative for B2B user needs to be somewhere from the contractor team. That is possible. So I can have an internal approver as well as an external approver, making sure that even before they reach to my tenant or my organization, they're already being verified. That is, again, another information or another authentication that can be done. We can have further information. So let's say I want to make sure what organization do they need to be part of. So it is HR, they need to be a C-level, and henceforth they're requesting all this information can be added in. We talked about lifecycle in terms of access reviews, but expiration of the project itself, let's assume the project is going to go for 6 months. I want to make sure the access package itself is deleted after 6 months, or I do a review on the access package, whether I want to extend it or not. That is something that we can configure here. There are something called custom extensions. That is more on the advanced topic where we say, hey, as these access packages are created, I want to have certain actions. So let's say, as the access is created, I want to create a direct report. So I want to make sure every report is being created for any access package or any request that is coming in. That would allow me to have a visual idea of how many requests are coming in. If there's an audit, I have all the logs created already. Since we talked about B2B, there was a question on how do we manage if there are external users coming in and they are not willing to use Authenticator itself. One thing that I would like to showcase, and you might have already seen, is we can have cross-tenant settings or external collaboration settings that allows you to not only select what applications they can see, or you can go and view or work on these applications. Their MFA, whatever MFA challenge they use in their tenant, can then be verified automatically in your tenant. So let's say they are using conditional access, they're using Microsoft tenant, and they have conditional access of their own. They don't have to do MFA twice. Then there was a question about external methods for authentication. So these are the few options that a user can be allowed to do it. So let's say for external users, I'm using external users because it's more complex and they are limited resources. They can have an email or OTP. Just by doing that, if let's say you're sharing a presentation with them and they click on it, even before they want to access it, they need to get an email OTP that they have provided from the email or the mailbox. That's how simple it is. There are FIDO keys, there are authentication and Windows Hello for Business that is recommended. But even for the external users where you're not managing the devices, or for the users who are using their personal devices, it's advised to have MAM policies to make sure the corporate resources that are being available on personal devices are protected, whether it's Android or iOS. That is part of your Intune already. Yeah, that's what I had. Did I miss any questions?
I wonder, Mohit, is it worth shining the light on verified identity a little bit? There's some question around some of the mechanics of that in the chat. Maybe just showing them where you go and what it looks like to create one, like a credential.
Yeah, I might not have access to verified ID itself. Yep.
Oh, well.
So we need another tenant for it. But I was planning to showcase this, which is
perfect.
How this verified ID works with access packages. So on the verified ID, again, you understand how and what all it entails. But for the configuration, you need, let's say, trust check or check trust as one of your verifier. Once you have that connection, or let's say DMV, you want to make sure that they have a driver license which is valid for a contractor. That is possible. It's easy to configure. We have great scripts on GitHub already. But once you have that, and let's say you have configured your verified ID, and that is linked to your entitlement management or access packages, when the user requests for it, they need to scan this QR code from their authenticator app, verify it, because verified ID is integrated with authenticator app, and it's as simple as that. Their attributes or the trust that comes with their verifier will be attached to it, and henceforth they can access those access packages.
And I guess I do see another question in the chat here. So Mohit, do you have the secrets behind the roadmap for that preview token protection feature I talked about in conditional access? Do you happen to know if it's going to be extended to support all enterprise apps?
Yes, but that's gonna come as of now with a new service called GSA, Global Secure Access. So the token protection extending to enterprise application and even your on-prem private applications would be covered under Global Secure Access. I cannot discuss the timeline because it's going to be under NDA.
Awesome. So if you guys reach out to your friendly account rep, maybe he can help get that information for you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess, Mohit, was there anything else you wanted to share, or do you want me to take back this screen share here briefly?
You can take it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So let me just attempt to bring this back here. The weather will let me. I can hear the rains starting outside. All right, here it comes. Awesome. Well, yeah, we appreciate everyone jumping on today. We've got some time here to do some more Q&A stuff, and Jackson, I'm sure you might have a few things to say. But before people start dropping off, I just want to draw everyone's attention to episode 2 in the series, all around advanced threat protection with Defender for Endpoint. Defender for Endpoint is one of my personal favorites, so I'll be on that one as well, presenting along with some other folks from Microsoft. So please do go ahead and register for that. It'll be a lot of fun. And Jackson, while we're waiting a few minutes here on some folks, maybe put more questions in the chat if they've got any. Have you got anything you'd like to say?
No, again, thank you so much for these great walkthroughs, Gareth and Mohit, and again, everybody, thank you so much for your time and attendance. Again, I view this as the beginning of a new chapter in which continually more so, this is, frankly, it's not just the beginning, we're building on momentum already underway. Nonprofits are front and center in the product development of Microsoft's products, right? More so and more so. So again, I know this may be initial overview for many, but please keep the feedback coming because we can't improve without your feedback. It's your voice that matters most, right? Incredibly excited for this series. Over time, you'll see how this all ties in. If there's a few takeaways, it's really one, again, that identity is such a key pillar of a zero trust framework, and that simply by getting identity right in part of Entra ID Plan 2, architecturally from the ground up, secure by design, you can mitigate risk for your organization as a whole while making life a lot easier for yourself from a day-to-day workflow standpoint. Really with that, I think we were able to address most of the questions, if not all, in the chat. I'm taking a brief scan one more time. Please feel free to. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to quickly say, the recording will be available on that website link, and we'll also follow up with the slides and the recording for anyone who wants it.
Yeah. Fantastic. We'll be following up with that information. Please feel free to reach out if you need anything. I'll drop my email in the chat here. Happy to get in touch. And if I'm not the right person for the conversation, I can loop you in with people, with the people who are. And we can, I can't wait for the next series. Always open to feedback and just, again, cannot wait for what's to come down the pike there. Awesome. Gareth, on you to close out.
Yeah, appreciate everyone's time. Likewise, if we can help, please reach out. Happy to even just have conversations about any of these topics to provide guidance to nonprofits. We love doing it. We love this stuff. So yeah, happy to help. And I guess with that, everyone have a great rest of the day. If you're in the path of this hurricane, then please be safe. If we're fueling up the generator up here in North Georgia in preparation for it, 'cause it looks like it's coming right at us, but yeah, if you're in Florida, right in the front end of it, be safe for sure.
Yeah, well, you'd be safe as well, Gareth. And thank you for squeezing this one in before Doomsday. And I really appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye just now.
Bye.